Okay. Hello. Uh. Oh God. Um. Phew. Well, I suppose I might as well begin talking about intention. That's what was on my mind yesterday. That I sort of had a mini breakthrough moment where I realized that I am in a sort of self-imposed artistic ritual at the moment where I am trying to upload a music video every day to my other music channel. And so I'm I'm working from a catalogue of old songs, so I'm simply preparing videos for these old songs, and I'm doing so just by grabbing old archive footage from the internet and just putting the song on top. Very simple kind of video making. And I find that there is something about this self-imposed ritual. I don't know how long it'll last. After all, I didn't do a SNES divination this week. I feel as if, to go on a slight tangent, whenever I put myself into a self-imposed ritual like this SNES divination, it leads me to different forms of ritual. So it's almost as if I wouldn't be doing this music video thing if I hadn't done the SNES divination. The SNES divination kind of got me into a routine of doing things, of making videos, which has kind of propulsed me into this new territory. So that's one aspect about rituals or repetitive routines, in that they kind of get the gears moving. When they end, it's not that they're ending necessarily, but that the energy that they've built up is being converted into a new medium, almost like water turning into steam. I feel as if the SNES divination is kind of steamed into something else. Again, I mean, I'm saying this without knowing what's going to happen with all these projects, but I suppose what I am interested in is intention. As I said, intention. That when you are constrained by a routine like this, especially in matters of creativity, you have to, force yourself a little bit. There is a mix of inspiration and forcefulness or discipline of some kind. And this is something I've always had a hard time with as a perfectionist. And the reason I had a hard time with it is because sometimes you can have the intention to make something good, to make a good song, a good music video, but the perfectionist in you knows that it's not a good song, it's not a good video. Good as in, by your own standards. It's not what you wanted it to be, or it's not even what it could have been, right? That there is unfulfilled potential in it. And so perfectionism kind of clashes with the good intention. You have an intention to make a good video, and yet what you are seeing on the screen or what you're hearing through your headphones is not what you wanted it to be. And I just had this sort of feeling yesterday that actually the key here is that the work, the result, is not up to you in the way that the perfectionist usually thinks. Like, how to say it, you can make a song and it can turn out really good, But the reason it turns out good is because of a huge history of accumulated experience, right? Uh, you learn from experience. I'm not even going to talk about talent yet. I'm not that interested in whether someone has talent or not. I'm thinking more in terms of self-expression, right? I mean, because if you consider all forms of creative self-expression to be art, then maybe the word talent doesn't really play as much of a role here. Even though I do think, there is obviously such a thing as talent, right? You see it, you hear it. You hear a pianist who is incredible when they're still a teenager and stuff like that, without, having practiced or rehearsed too much. Those kind of cases. But here, I'm talking more of practice and experience. That if you are making any kind of art and then you look at the result and your ego likes what it sees, it's not because the ego has made that good. That's what the ego wants to believe. The ego wants to attribute to itself the merit of the product, kind of thing, right? It's as if the ego thinks that the artistic impulse is like a blank slate, that you sit in front of the blank sheet of paper, whatever, and you make something from zero. But obviously you're not. Like, you are building on everything that you've learned over the years, all of the experiences, all the trial and error that you've done. And this trial and error has heightened your intuition, so that you now have a better grasp of when to draw a line and when not to draw a line. In a sense, the ego in this case is simply following intuition. I'm probably being too harsh here. I think that it's probably doing many other things, and it's not so easily separable, what the ego is and what intuition is. But in any case, the end result, the work of art in this case, will not be good because the ego has made a good series of decisions. Or not only that, it's because of a huge database of experience. And this experience is the experience, to make it a little less abstract, it's just the experience of you having tried to make a song for years, and just trying and making one song and then another song and then another song, and then after a while that experience accumulates and you find yourself being able to make songs more comfortably and without feeling that you're not satisfied by them. And so what has happened then in that scenario is that for many years you have had the intention to make a song, and you have carried through that intention. You said, like, okay, I want to make a good song, so I do it. And then the result, whether the result is good or bad, is in a weird way irrelevant here, because whether it is good or bad under this model would depend in a big part on, in great whatever, it'll depend on this experience which you can't pull out of your sleeve, kind of thing. You can't sort of lift yourself from your boots in this regard. The experience is something that you have no control on, control over, except in the act of just pursuing an intention. You have the intention to do something, and that creates experience in that domain, right? You have the intention to learn to cook, so you try making a meal, and it doesn't taste good. And the perfectionist ego would say, okay, let's really work hard to make this taste good. You'll try and sort of, you won't let it be a finished piece until it's perfect. You won't say, okay, done, let's move on to the next dish. The perfectionist wants to grab that dish that didn't work out and make it work. But the reason it didn't work out wasn't because of some failing of the ego. The ego takes it way too personally. It's not because of some failing of the ego, it's because of a lack of experience. Right? And so, yeah, in this case, I on one hand, I find it interesting how this resonates with the idea of the will in magic, because, of course, the will is intention, right? You do your will, or you follow your will. And I had always interpreted this, I suppose, in past videos, in a slightly, I don't know how to say it, I'd given it less agency. I'd given this whole situation less agency, where I always thought that I'd always had this view of the will as being, you find your will, as in you find what was the unconscious desire, and then I almost sort of pictured it as if once you know that, it just sort of happens on its own, almost. It runs its course. That in that case, what the ego needed to do wasn't to follow the will, but simply to discover the will, and then the will did itself. I still think that there is a lot to that, at least in my picture of the world, my experience, or whatever. But I see now that there is also another way of seeing it, which is the kind of the one that I had been ignoring, and it's probably like just this more direct way of you do something, you will something, regardless of whether it is your true intention or your true will. I tend to be very centered on what's like the true, the authentic kind of will in the self, where the ego has all these different desires, but that maybe they don't really serve the purpose of the self. Now, I still think that's important, but I realize now that you can see it in a slightly more free way, in that you can just really come up with any intention and follow it. And by following it, you acquire experience in that intention. And that it is the ego who is responsible for choosing the intention and navigating it, but not for the results that come from it. At least that's the intuition I'm getting at the moment, but I want to think about this some more. So yeah, thanks.